Hey, 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 beautiful Earth Angels Divine. It's Rev Ronnie here, and it is November 10th, 2017. Wow, time flies, huh? Well, I guess sometimes it feels like it does, and sometimes it doesn't, and what is time really? That's another video for another day. I wanted to try and see if I can communicate with you all about seeing the interconnected, intricately interwoven web of we, and seeing it and then understanding what a potential, I'm going to call it pitfall, might be by seeing it, or something negative that might occur, and how we might be able to get around it. And the reason for that is because we are in a, my mind was about to say time, as I just was talking about time being illusory, but we are in the here and the now, and we do utilize time. So keeping that in mind. In this here and now, we are in an existence that is experiencing a palpable evolution, a transition of consciousness, because any evolution that occurs first occurs on the level of consciousness. And for evolution, for change to occur, that which is getting in the way of the change, or is going to be changed, is what is going to be seen. And essentially what we are experiencing is a shift in consciousness from a paradigm that has been a pervading paradigm for the last thousands of years, that being fear, into one of what I call namaste love. And I call it namaste love because the word love is utilized to connote so many different kinds of feelings and emotions, whereas namaste is used to speak to the divine in me, recognizes, honors the divine in you. And that's the love to which I speak. And that's the consciousness to which we are evolving into. Having said that, as I had aforementioned, to evolve into love consciousness, which means we're coming out of fear consciousness, means that we have to look at what we're coming out of, which is the fear, to allow for the love. So in the process of our evolution, as much as we are opening to grander and greater expressions and experiences of love, we are also going to be facing the fears that we have been holding on to, that are now being let go of, to allow for this greater evolution, this transcendence into an existence that is the expression and the experience of more love, of greater love. So, one of the things that happens when our consciousness is expanding is that we start to understand more, and we start to see more. And the more to which I'm speaking of course, is love. But again, to see the love, we need to face the fears. So we're also seeing more fears. One of the things that we begin to notice is, as I started, the intricately interwoven, interconnected web of we. And it's not just we as in our species. It's not just we as in our Earth school and all of that which exists here, every aspect, every molecule, every kingdom, the animal, the mineral, the plant, so on and so forth. But all as in everything, all of existence. So I'm going to give a quick example of that, so that there's an understanding to a shallow degree. Let's be fair here. going to try and, keep it short and sweet and concise, and we would need probably a lot longer if I was going to get into a major example. But when we think about weather, okay, so we on our Earth School experience different kinds of weather at different areas of the Earth, but the weather is affected by what is also affecting our Earth School. Our Earth School is rotating in a cosmos where there are so much galactic stuff that are roaming around there, swooshing around. I mean, the fact that we've existed for billions of years, the Earth has anyways, in and of itself is just incredible when you think about the meteorites and all of the other cosmic dust that's up there that, massive in size. And yet we're still here. But if there is something that's happening out there, so we're not even on Earth now, we're like out in the universe, in the cosmos, and there's some kind of, sun sprinkling something, starburst stuff going on there. All of a sudden, down here, there might be some crazy temperature stuff happening. Like, I don't know, this past year, just a month ago, when we were having 31 degrees at the equinox of autumn. Like, it was September 20 something, and it was 31 degrees. Now, I'm not sure actually if it was due to something cosmically happening, but the point is that when things are happening that we're experiencing in our own individuated lives, it's because of something else that's going on, that's all connected to something else, that allows for our experience in the here and now to be whatever it is that it is. Another example that I'll bring that's more personal, let's say, to our hi Rebecca, thank you for being there and for listening. Blessings. That might be easier to get for everyone. Your parents, okay? So you are you're here, you exist, right? A miracle, by the way, but I will explain to you how that is in just 2 seconds. So you have your parents who may have grown up in the very same city, but they might be from completely opposite ends of the world. The point being that they were strangers at one point. And somehow, some way, through circumstances, because this thing happened over here that brought your mom to this position at this day, at this time, and these things that happened to your dad throughout his life brought him to this place at this time, allowed for them to meet, and whatever place that they were in their own beingnesses on that day, allowed for them to be open enough to see each other in that moment, that they were able to make a connection. Because they made that connection, and then one thing led to another thing, and you came to be. Now, they would not have been able to have made that connection if their parents hadn't had some kind of serendipitous meeting and had been at the right place at the right time and met each other with that place in a place of beingness, of openness to meeting one another and recognizing each other, and then taking that risk, that chance to get to know each other. And then on that fateful day, that was the perfect day for your mom and dad, or actually your grandparents at this time, to create a child that your parent then came from. And then, are we getting my point here? So everything that exists is interdependent on everything else. So as independent as we would like to think that we are, and many ways that we are not. Even the functioning of our Earth School, the ecosystem that we live within, is an interdependent system, which is why when you hear people, and some call them fanatics, environmentalists and nature enthusiasts talking about, let's say, the dying off of the bees. they're not just talking about the dying off of the bees because they have this absurd affection for bees, or they just absolutely love honey and they don't see their lives being able to be lived without it. It's because we as a human species will be negatively affected if bees become extinct. And there's so much involved in that. But very quickly, with the pollination of plant life that they provide, if that is taken away, then the plants will not be able to grow. They will not be able to provide fruit and vegetables and all of the other things that we need in order to eat and survive. It's not just our species, but all other ones that are dependent on it. And we are without. So those are just a couple of examples to try to elucidate the idea that I'm trying to bring forth regarding one aspect of our consciousness growth that one may be gifted, and I believe we shall all be gifted to experience as we are evolving. Now, the thing with that, so that's just part one. That's what I want to talk about with respect to the misinterpretations that can occur, because as we are transcending into love consciousness again, and I realize I'm repeating myself, but some things warrant repetition, we face the fears that need to be embraced so that we can allow for greater love to come through and consciousness to expand. So when we start to see the interconnectedness of we, and we realize that everything has a purpose and a meaning, the mind likes to know, it likes to understand. And having been conditioned, again, for thousands of years through the consciousness paradigm that is fear, it is highly possible, especially if one is on the journey of consciousness expansion, that when you start seeing the interconnectedness, your mind might start to interpret things through fear. All right? So, for example, now I'm going to give another example. When I'll give a personal example that I don't know if the example is going to be exactly what occurred, but of like kind. When I started seeing the interconnectedness of we to much larger degrees, I would see someone would come and start speaking to me, and I'm a guide light, so people are coming and they're sharing more readily any issues that they happen to be going through, and issues being opportunities for growth. And someone might come to me and share something with me, and it was almost as though I was listening to myself through the other person telling me what they're going through, but it was what I was going through. So that in and of itself was like, woo! But then while they're sharing something with me, my mind would potentially could get paranoid that maybe they're seeing into maybe this isn't even what is true, what's coming through them, because it was so straight on with what I had just experienced, that my mind was like, oh, this isn't even their experience. They're reading into something, or they know something on a level, on a soul level, and they're telling me this because I didn't go through it properly, or I made a mistake and I did something wrong. Is one thing. Like there's like a paranoia that somehow I did something wrong, or seeing the interconnectedness of we, that, you know, if someone is telling me something about themselves and they're coming from a very negative perspective, and I'm thinking to myself that, well, my mind is telling me, if I'm in a state of fear, that the example that they're giving, for example, is being told to me because, again, they're trying to point out where I'm going wrong. Or else it might be something like, because I am realizing how interconnected we are, the mind starts to get worried that people are picking up on my stuff and they're seeing more into me than I might not necessarily want them to be. So they might have picked up on the fact that my mind just saw something and it didn't like it. And I'm being called out on it. Even though the person's not saying anything, it's just all me inside of me having that conversation with me because of this interconnectedness that I'm seeing. And my mind is freaking out, feeling like it's completely naked. And everything is being seen, and everything is being seen through the eyes of judgment and through the eyes of severe judgment, but like in an extraordinarily negative manner, where I'm basically being told, like, I'm a horrible person to some extent, in some way, shape, or form. So the reality is of course, that's not happening at all. But when we start to see the interconnectedness of we, and we realize that there is that, and that the reality is that telepathy is real, and we are able to communicate. Actually, we do communicate with each other in far greater degrees in every other way but through language. That's the last way that we have learnt as a species to communicate with one another. There can be fears that arise because we are being more transparent, being more vulnerable, more authentic. And being more authentic means that we're allowing ourselves to be seen more, which can be scary because the way that we've been taught to look at ourselves is through judgment, and not positive judgment, but through negative judgment, through measuring ourselves up against some barometer value system that is external to the authenticity of we, and is asking us to see where we can be better than who we actually are, and not to see how amazing we are as we are. So because we've been taught that, that's what's going to come up as we start to see things more clearly, because that's what's standing in the way of us seeing clearly, are the times that we are seeing through fear. So what we need to do is to recognize that when the fears are coming up, if we're having any kind of a response that's negative in our experience of it, that it is what it is, which is the fear that is saying to you, please look at me because I'm not loving this part of me. I'm needing to know that I'm not a horrible person and that I am lovable. I'm a good person, so that you can love that part of yourself. And to recognize that it is illusory, the fear that's coming up, and that the interconnected web of we, existence, the universe, us on a soul level, each and every one of us, would never communicate through judgment, would never communicate in a way that would make you feel less than or not enough. And even when showing where there's opportunities for growth, even when showing where there's an avenue by which more love can be expressed, it would be done so in a way that would make you feel compassion. It would make you feel like your heart is expanding, as opposed to wanting to run away and hide your head in the sand. So when that's coming up, you know that it's fear and that it's just asking for love. So as consciousness is expanding and the fears are arising, it is to be aware of this, as I said at the beginning, pitfalls that can come up along the way, so that you don't get tripped up and fall into the pitfall, and definitely don't want to get stuck in there as well. And therefore, to do your best to look for the perspective of love consciousness, right? So in seeing the interconnectedness of we and knowing that there's messages in everything, is also to recognize that, for one, the messages are always of love, through love, for the benefit of all, starting with you. Also, one of the things that also will be of assistance is that sometimes you will see something and think that the message is for you, and that's very normal. Someone called it being egocentric, which, yes, you can see it like that, but part of ascending into love consciousness is through yourself, and you need to love yourself inside and out. Every one of the 100 trillion cells you've got inside of you, all aspects of you, the bad, the good, the beautiful, the ugly, you need to love all. You don't have to like it all, but you need to love it and understand it and be able to embrace it and transcend whatever aspects need to be transcended. Our fears, which cause us to act in ways that we might not like, need to be held so that we don't act in those ways. So one of the things that also is of assistance when recognizing the interconnectedness of we and the messages that we might be seeing, that we are receiving, is also recognizing that sometimes the message is not necessarily for you. The message is through you for someone else. And sometimes you might receive something that you are receiving so that you can give the message to another. Yes, we are all connected. Love you. Good night. Mwah. Good night, Rebecca. Blissings, blessings, blessings. Sorry, I'm kind of seeing, but I'm not seeing everything. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it. Is that fear your ego? That's a question from Bob asking, is fear your ego? So that's semantics to me regarding fear and ego. When Freud coined the term ego, he was not speaking about a prideful aspect of we that is focused in fear. He was talking about the personality. And as it's understood today, and it's been used today, ego can be, I guess, seen to be that part of us that is the inauthentic, human part of us that is fear. But I kind of take issue with it, because for me, I do see that we as humanity have the ability to be operating from love consciousness, in which case the ego would simply be that part of us that is the human vehicle through which we are expressing soul, and the translator, if you will, in this dimension of soul. So it wouldn't be our fears, because if we were operating through love consciousness, it would be love consciousness that we were operating through, and that's what we would be speaking. And ego, in accordance to its original meaning, would be the human personality that's doing it for us, or whom we are doing it through. But in terms that it seems to be used now, for the most part, yes, you could equate it with that if you wanted to. So that's why I try not to use it, because it's not how I understand it. Speaking to ego equaling fear. Anyways, I hope that answered your question, Bob. And to everybody else that's joined in and has participated here this evening, thank you so much. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free. And if not, you can always ask under the video after I'm done, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you might have, as I'm kind of near the end. Yeah, so again, the expansion of consciousness is one that is both, it can be both very enlightening and absolutely wondrous and blissful, but sometimes there can be some terrifying moments that we go through in which we're facing fears, which can be made much, much easier if we are aware of what can come up so that we can expand. And on that note, I would strongly advise for those who, unlike myself, are not taken unconsciously into these conscious expansions, to get somebody to go through this with you. When you journey with someone like myself, who has dedicated their lives to being a guiding light through what I call the valley of fears or shadowland, it's much easier. It's not terrifying. It's not horrifying. The fears come up and you have someone like me who's right there with you, that, you know, you don't suddenly lose your breath and have some anxiety attack or feel all alone and get lost and what have you. You have the tools and you have the resources and you have the support that makes it so much easier to walk through the valley of fears, to go through the shadowlands and face these aspects of ourselves which can also be seen as so beautiful and so much opportunity for growth and for love expansion. And when we start to shift how we see these things, because, you know, the valley of fear, it's very like horrifying. Shadowland, it's like, woo, darkness, ah! But it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't, you know. A lot of the shadows and fears that we have inside of us, those voices that are speaking to us in our head, are really like, a lot of them are really parts of us from when we were a kid. So it's like your 3-year-old voice talking to you, or your 10-year-old voice. It's not some horrible monster. It's usually like you at some point in your life that's been hurt, that went through something, what I call a soul shock, or what others would call a trauma or a tragedy. And there's a fear that's there that is, on a more scientific level, has been embedded, almost like a hard drive, a code in your hard drive of your computer. It's been embedded through a neurosynaptic pathway in your brain, that when something similar happens in your life, a stimuli that it causes a similar feeling, it brings that neural pathway up, and that voice automatically is going, what's going on here? We got to watch out. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And what we term as the shadow is really the parts of you that want to protect you. They want to make sure you're going to be okay, and that this horrible thing that happened before doesn't happen again. So when we start to shift how we're seeing these things, it becomes a lot easier to see these things and to transcend out of them, or to integrate them more lovingly into who we are, and to make use of them instead of being used by them, which happens when we wind up becoming overwhelmed and lose ourselves into the fear. So, on that note, may our every now, as we are expanding into greater expressions, experiences of love consciousness, be of ease and comfort, sweetness and grace, and allow for each of we an experience of life that we would call our fabulous. So on that note, I'm just going to take a quick look-see to make sure that there's no other questions. I thank you all once again, sending love's gratitude and blessings to one and all. Mwah. Bliss kiss from me to you. Wonderful evening. Blessedly be, everyone.